In the crowded aisles of Super Save, worlds were about to collide. A heavily pregnant woman desperate for help. An arrogant employee who couldn't be bothered to care. And hidden among the shoppers, a Hollywood legend whose quiet intervention would transform not just one life, but everyone who witnessed what happened next. When kindness meets cruelty, the most unexpected hero can emerge. And his actions would leave the entire store speechless, proving that sometimes the most powerful moments happen far from any camera. The fluorescent lights of Super Save department store buzzed overhead as Elsa Matthews shifted uncomfortably, one hand supporting her 8-month pregnant belly, the other clutching several shopping bags that dug painfully into her fingers. Her feet throbbed in her swollen ankles as she approached the customer service counter, where a slender young man with gelled hair and an expression of perpetual boredom scrolled through his phone, pointedly ignoring the growing line of customers. Elsa hadn't planned on buying so much today. As a single mother-to-be working double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, she calculated every penny. But the unexpected bonus from her supervisor had given her a rare opportunity to stock up on essentials for the baby. Diapers were on sale. The crib sheets she'd been eyeing for months had finally been marked down. A kind elderly neighbor had offered to drive her to the store, but couldn't stay. She had a doctor's appointment of her own. "I'll just grab a few things," Elsa had assured her. "I'll be fine taking the bus home." That was 3 hours ago. Now, her back ached fiercely, her ankles had swollen to twice their normal size, and the weight of her purchases seemed to increase with each passing minute. The baby kicked insistently, as if protesting her prolonged standing. "Excuse me," Elsa said softly, her voice strained. A small trickle of sweat ran down her temple despite the store's aggressive air conditioning. "Could I possibly get some help carrying these to my car? I'm not supposed to lift heavy things, and I'm afraid I've bought more than I can manage." The employee, Peter, according to his name tag, barely glanced up from his phone. His eyes flicked dismissively over Elsa's round belly, her flushed face, and the multiple bags cutting into her hands. "Not my department," he said flatly, returning to his screen. "Try asking someone in stock." Peter Wilson had worked at Super Save for exactly 11 months and 17 days. Not that he was counting or anything. With a business degree from a second-rate online college and dreams of corporate success, he viewed his customer service position as deeply beneath him. His supervisor had spoken to him twice about his attitude problem, but Peter considered it realism. Why pretend this job mattered? Why go above and beyond for customers who would forget him the moment they left the store? "I don't get paid enough to be a personal shopping assistant," he often complained to his co-workers, who had learned to tune him out. Elsa blinked, taken aback by his tone. Behind her, the line grew longer. An elderly woman tooted sympathetically. A teenager looked up from her own phone, eyes widening at the exchange. "I've already tried," Elsa explained, her voice still polite despite the burning in her lower back. "They said to come to customer service." Peter sighed dramatically. "Look, lady, I can't leave the desk unmanned. Store policy." He gestured vaguely toward a sign on the wall without looking at it. "Next customer, please." As Elsa stood helplessly at the counter, Peter felt a flicker of something. Guilt, perhaps, but quickly suppressed it. Not his problem. He had inventory to log and only 20 minutes until his break. "Please," Elsa tried again, her voice cracking slightly. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. My doctor said I shouldn't strain myself, and these bags are really heavy." Peter looked up, irritation flashing across his features. "Ma'am, like I said, not my department. There's nothing I can do. Maybe you should have thought about that before buying more than you could carry." A collective intake of breath came from the customers in line. An older man in a plaid shirt stepped forward slightly, then hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Elsa's eyes welled with tears. She desperately tried to blink away. The weight of the bags, the baby, the long day. It all suddenly felt overwhelming. One of the plastic bags chose that moment to split, sending packages of newborn diapers tumbling to the floor. "Great," Peter muttered, not moving to help. "We're going to need cleanup over here." Elsa crouched awkwardly, trying to gather the fallen items, her pregnant belly making the simple task nearly impossible. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she struggled to reach the packages that had slid under the counter. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though no one could hear her. A middle-aged woman in the line shot Peter a disapproving glare. "Young man, aren't you going to help her?" Peter crossed his arms defensively. I'm handling the register. It's not my job to pick up after customers." The woman's jaw dropped. Two teenage boys standing nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. The tension in the air thickened as other shoppers stopped to watch the scene unfold. Elsa finally managed to stand, packages clutched precariously against her chest, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "It's fine," she said, though it clearly wasn't. "I'll manage somehow." For a moment, no one moved. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights seemed to grow louder as the standoff continued. Elsa's shoulders slumped in defeat. Peter maintained his indifferent expression, though his eyes darted nervously around the growing crowd of onlookers. "Look, there's a bench near the exit," he finally offered, his voice slightly less harsh. "You can sit there and maybe call someone." Elsa's breathing had become shallow, her face pale with exhaustion. The weight of the bags had left angry red marks on her fingers. The small concession from Peter was too little, too late. "I don't have anyone to call," she admitted quietly, the words hanging in the air like a plea that no one seemed willing to answer. Peter looked away, pretending to busy himself with paperwork. The line of customers shifted uncomfortably, everyone witnessing the cruelty but no one quite brave enough to step in. It was the peculiar paralysis of public spaces, the bystander effect in full force. What none of them realized was that someone else was watching too. Someone who wasn't paralyzed by social convention. Someone who had been quietly observing the entire interaction from the book section, his presence masked by a baseball cap and casual attire. And he had seen enough. The tall figure in the baseball cap had initially come to Super Save for something mundane: toothpaste and a new phone charger. Keanu Reeves hadn't planned on spending more than 10 minutes in the store. After a grueling 14-hour day on set filming his latest action sequel, all he wanted was to grab his items and retreat to the solitude of his hotel room. He'd chosen this particular store because it was far from the tourist areas of the city, where he could usually shop in peace without being recognized. His baseball cap was pulled low, his stubble jaw partially hidden by the collar of his jacket. Experience had taught him that most people weren't looking for celebrities in everyday places like discount department stores. They expected the famous to exist in separate, glamorous spheres, red carpets and exclusive restaurants, not browsing for dental floss under harsh fluorescent lighting. Keanu had been about to head to the checkout when he noticed the pregnant woman struggling with her bags. Something in her determined dignity resonated with him. He watched as she approached the customer service counter, expecting the routine kindness that often accompanies such obvious need. Instead, he witnessed the young employee's casual cruelty, the dismissive glances, the refusal to help someone clearly in distress. Keanu hesitated. He knew the moment he intervened, his anonymity would likely shatter. Phones would emerge. Social media would explode. What should be a simple act of human decency would transform into "celebrity does good deed" headlines. He'd experienced it before. Moments of genuine connection tainted by the incessant click of cameras, by strangers wanting pieces of him rather than seeing the actual human gesture. He took a step back, considering the exit doors just 20 feet away. He could leave now, unnoticed. No one would know. No one would judge him. But as the woman's bag split and diapers scattered across the floor, as the employee made no move to help, as tears slid down her flushed cheeks, something hardened in Keanu's expression. His jaw set with quiet determination. Some things mattered more than privacy. Some moments demanded action regardless of consequences. With a deep breath, he set down his shopping basket and moved through the aisles toward the customer service counter. People barely glanced at him as he approached. Just another customer in a worn jacket and faded jeans. The baseball cap did its job, keeping his face in shadow as he stopped beside the pregnant woman, who was now struggling to hold her remaining bags while looking hopelessly at the items scattered on the floor. "Let me help you with those," Keanu said, his voice low and gentle as he crouched to gather the fallen packages. Elsa looked at him with surprise, relief washing over her tear-streaked face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to." "It's no problem at all," he replied, carefully stacking the diaper packages in his arms. Rising to his full height, he turned toward Peter, who had barely looked up from his phone. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his tone polite but firm. "This woman needs assistance getting her purchases to her car. She's pregnant and shouldn't be carrying heavy items." Peter glanced up with the same bored expression he'd shown Elsa. "Like I already told her, that's not my—" The words died in his throat as recognition dawned slowly on his face. His eyes widened, his mouth hanging open mid-sentence. You're... Peter stammered, color draining from his face. Keanu didn't acknowledge the recognition. He simply continued as if Peter had said nothing. I understand you're busy at the register. Perhaps you could call someone else who could help? Or point us to a cart she could use. By now, several nearby customers had noticed the interaction. A whisper rippled through the small crowd. Is that? It can't be. It is. Peter's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the store phone. I'll call for assistance right away, sir. Keanu turned back to Elsa, who was looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion, not yet recognizing who had come to her aid. While we wait, let me help you with these, he said, gently taking the remaining bags from her hands. You should sit down. There's a bench over there. Elsa nodded gratefully, still unaware of her helper's identity. Thank you so much. I've been on my feet all day, and my doctor says I need to be careful about... She stopped mid-sentence as she finally got a clear look at his face. Her eyes widened in disbelief. A flash went off somewhere in the store. Someone taking a picture with their phone. Then another. The quiet murmurs grew louder. Keanu maintained his focus entirely on Elsa, ignoring the growing commotion around them. Don't worry about that, he said quietly. Let's get you settled. He guided her to the bench, setting her bags carefully beside her. Elsa stared at him, momentarily speechless as the realization of who was helping her fully sank in. You're Keanu Reeves, she finally managed. He smiled gently. And you're someone who needs a little help right now. That's all that matters. By now, Peter had emerged from behind the counter, moving with an entirely different demeanor. Eager, solicitous, almost frantic. Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry for any inconvenience. If I had known you were in our store today... There's no need for special treatment, Keanu interrupted quietly but firmly. I'm just concerned about making sure this customer gets the assistance she needs. His eyes met Peter's with an intensity that made the younger man shrink back slightly. Wouldn't you agree that helping customers in need should be a priority? Peter swallowed hard. His earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Yes, of course, sir. Absolutely. A store manager came rushing over, alerted by the growing crowd and whispers. Mr. Reeves, what an honor to have you in our store. Is there anything I can help you with today? Keanu gestured toward Elsa. Yes, this customer needs assistance getting her purchases to her car. She's pregnant and shouldn't be carrying heavy items. The manager turned to Elsa, taking in her exhausted appearance and the pile of bags. Of course. Peter, get a cart immediately. And call Tom from stockroom to help carry everything out. Peter hurried away, face burning with embarrassment. The manager continued, Mr. Reeves, please accept our sincerest apologies for any inconvenience. If there's anything we can do to make your shopping experience more pleasant. Thank you, Keanu said, cutting off the effusive apology, but I'm fine. I'm more concerned about making sure she gets home safely. He nodded toward Elsa, who was watching the entire exchange with wide eyes. The crowd around them had grown, phones raised discreetly, and some not so discreetly, to capture the moment. But Keanu remained focused solely on Elsa, as if they were the only two people in the store. Which items were you still looking for? He asked her. Elsa blinked, momentarily confused by the question. I was hoping to find a baby monitor, but I couldn't reach the ones on the top shelf, and then I got distracted with everything else. Then let's find you a baby monitor, Keanu said with a warm smile, extending his hand to help her up from the bench. I'm no expert, but I'd be happy to reach the high shelves for you. As Peter returned with a cart, nearly tripping over himself in his haste, the crowd parted to let Keanu and Elsa pass. The same customers who had stood by silently during her distress now watched in awe as one of Hollywood's biggest stars casually guided a pregnant woman through the baby section, attentively listening to her explain the differences between various baby monitors. No one noticed that Keanu had completely abandoned his own shopping basket. In that moment, nothing mattered to him except making sure that Elsa, a stranger in need of kindness, received the help she deserved. The store manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, couldn't believe her eyes. Keanu Reeves, the Keanu Reeves, was in her Super Save, personally helping a pregnant customer shop for baby items. She had been in retail management for nearly 20 years and had seen celebrities occasionally, but never one behaving with such genuine kindness toward a stranger. "Mr. Reeves," Patricia said, hurrying alongside them as Keanu pushed Elsa's now-filled cart toward the checkout area. "Please allow us to comp these items for you both." "It would be our honor." Keanu shook his head politely. "Thank you, but that's not necessary. I'm sure Elsa has already budgeted for these items." He glanced at Elsa, who nodded in confirmation, though her expression suggested she was still processing the surreal turn her shopping trip had taken. "Then at least allow us to provide a staff member to help with checkout and loading the car," Patricia insisted. "Peter will be happy to assist, won't you, Peter?" Peter stood nearby, his earlier arrogance completely vanished, replaced by a complex mixture of embarrassment, awe, and something that looked suspiciously like shame. He nodded quickly, unable to meet Elsa's eyes. "Actually," Keanu said gently, "I think Elsa might be more comfortable if someone else helped. Perhaps you have another staff member available." The subtle rebuke wasn't lost on anyone. Patricia's expression tightened momentarily as she glanced at Peter. "Of course. Tom will help instead." She gestured to a stockroom employee who had appeared with a dolly. "And Peter, I'll need to speak with you in my office afterward." Peter's face paled. He looked from Patricia to Elsa to Keanu, suddenly seeming much younger than his 24 years. I understand," he said quietly. As Tom began loading Elsa's purchases onto the checkout counter, Keanu stayed beside her, engaging her in conversation that deliberately ignored the growing crowd of onlookers and the occasional flash of a camera phone. "How far along are you?" he asked. Elsa rested one hand on her rounded belly. 8 months. Just a few weeks to go." She hesitated, then added, "It's a boy. I'm naming him James, after my father." "James," Keanu repeated with a warm smile. "A strong name." The cashier, a young woman who kept stealing glances at Keanu while trying to maintain her professionalism, rang up Elsa's items with shaking hands. When the total appeared on the screen, Elsa reached for her wallet, but fumbled slightly, dropping it to the floor. Before anyone could react, Keanu had already knelt to retrieve it, handing it back to her with a gentle gesture that somehow acknowledged her dignity while offering assistance. It was a small moment, but not lost on the watching customers. How easily he moved between Hollywood star and simply being a kind human being. From across the store, Peter watched the interaction. His earlier irritation completely evaporated. He had recognized Keanu Reeves instantly. He'd seen all of his films, had even dressed as Neo for Halloween the previous year. Yet here was this massive celebrity, going out of his way to help someone Peter had dismissed without a second thought. The contrast made his stomach churn with embarrassment. As Elsa finished paying and Tom began loading her purchases onto the dolly, Keanu continued chatting with her, asking about her preparations for the baby, listening attentively to her answers. It struck several observers how genuinely interested he seemed, not performing kindness for an audience, but engaging with authentic care. Patricia returned, having dispatched Peter to her office to wait. "Mr. Reeves, I want to sincerely apologize for our staff members' behavior earlier. That is absolutely not representative of our store's values." Keanu's expression remained gentle but firm. "I appreciate that. But perhaps the apology should be directed to Elsa, not to me." Patricia turned immediately to Elsa. "Ma'am, I am deeply sorry for the way you were treated today. It was unacceptable, and I assure you we will address it thoroughly with our staff." Elsa nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the attention but appreciative of the acknowledgement. "Thank you. I understand everyone has bad days." "That's very gracious of you," Patricia replied, "but there's no excuse for what happened. We're implementing a new customer service training program next month, and I think today's incident highlights exactly why it's needed." As they spoke, a small crowd had gathered near the exit, phones raised discreetly. Whispers circulated. "It's really him. Did you see how he helped her? No entourage, no security." Several customers who had witnessed Peter's earlier behavior were now recounting it to newcomers, the story already taking on elements of legend. Tom had finished loading the dolly and stood ready. "Your car, ma'am?" he asked Elsa politely. "Oh," Elsa said, her face falling slightly. "I don't have a car. I was planning to take the bus, but—" She glanced at her many bags. "I'd be happy to give you a ride home," Keanu offered immediately, "if you're comfortable with that." Elsa hesitated, clearly torn between necessity and the strangeness of accepting a ride from a movie star she'd only just met. "Or I could call you a taxi," he added, sensing her uncertainty. "My treat. A taxi would be wonderful," Elsa admitted with visible relief. "Thank you so much." Keanu nodded, understanding her caution, and asked Patricia if the store could call a taxi service they trusted. As Patricia hurried to make the arrangements, Keanu helped Tom push the dolly toward the exit. They had nearly reached the doors when a voice called out from behind them. "Wait. Please wait." Peter jogged toward them, his face flushed. He stopped a respectful distance away, his body language completely different from earlier. Shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, hands fidgeting nervously. "Miss Patricia said I should wait in her office. But I can't. Not without." He took a deep breath. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Elsa directly, "I am so sorry for how I treated you earlier. There's no excuse. I was rude and unhelpful, and you deserved better." An uncomfortable silence followed his words. Several customers watched the exchange with interest, wondering how Elsa would respond to this sudden reversal. Elsa studied Peter's face for a moment. "Thank you for apologizing," she said finally. "I appreciate that." Peter nodded, then turned to Keanu. "And Mr. Reeves, I'm a huge fan, actually. But that's not important. What's important is that you showed me what it actually means to help someone. Not because they're famous or important, but just because they need it." His voice cracked slightly. "I won't forget that lesson." Keanu held Peter's gaze steadily. "We all make mistakes," he said quietly. "What matters is how we respond to them afterward." Peter swallowed hard. Would it be okay if I helped load the taxi when it comes? I know it doesn't make up for before, but I'd like to try." Elsa and Keanu exchanged glances. After a moment, Elsa nodded. That would be fine. The transformation in Peter was striking. The sullen, dismissive employee had vanished, replaced by someone eager to make amends. As they waited for the taxi, he asked Elsa thoughtful questions about what she still needed for the baby. When she mentioned struggling to assemble the crib she'd purchased last week, he shyly offered information about the store's assembly service. "It's supposed to be for items purchased here, but I could put in a special request," he explained. "No charge, of course." Watching this interaction, several other employees exchanged meaningful glances. They had worked with Peter for months and had never seen this side of him. The customers, too, were affected by the visible change. This public redemption playing out in the store entrance. When the taxi finally arrived, Peter was the first to help Tom load the packages into the trunk. He held the door for Elsa, making sure she was comfortably seated before closing it carefully. "Thank you again," Elsa said through the open window. "Both of you." Her eyes moved from Peter to Keanu, genuine gratitude in her expression. Peter stepped back as the taxi prepared to depart. "I'll call you about the crib assembly," he promised. Before the taxi pulled away, Keanu leaned in slightly. "Take care of yourself and James," he said with a warm smile. "And remember, sometimes people surprise you, in good ways." As the taxi disappeared down the street, the gathered crowd finally gave in to their excitement. Phones were raised openly now, requests for photos and autographs coming from all directions. Keanu accommodated them with patient good humor, though he gently declined when someone asked him to recreate his help to the pregnant woman, for a better angle. "Some moments shouldn't be performances," he explained kindly but firmly. Meanwhile, Patricia had drawn Peter aside. Their conversation was brief but intense. Rather than firing him on the spot, as many had expected, she appeared to be giving him serious advice, which he received with uncharacteristic humility. When Keanu finally made his way back into the store to retrieve his abandoned basket of toothpaste and phone charger, he found the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Employees were more attentive to customers. Shoppers were making eye contact with each other, holding doors, offering help unprompted. It was as if his simple act of kindness had reminded everyone of something essential that had been temporarily forgotten in the rush of daily life. That beneath the transactions and hurried exchanges, they were all simply humans, capable of making each other's burdens a little lighter. 3 days after the incident at Super Save, Patricia gathered all employees for an emergency morning meeting before the store opened. Standing at the front of the break room, she surveyed the faces before her. Some curious, some bored, some still half asleep with coffee cups clutched in their hands. By now, you've all heard about what happened on Tuesday with the pregnant customer, she began, her voice firm but not unkind. What some of you may not know is that video of the incident has gone viral. Over 2 million views as of this morning. A murmur rippled through the assembled staff. Peter, sitting in the back corner, seemed to shrink in his seat. Corporate has been in touch, Patricia continued. They're concerned as they should be. But this meeting isn't about assigning blame. Her eyes briefly met Peter's. It's about what we can learn from this situation. She clicked a remote, and the large TV on the wall lit up with security footage from the store. There was no sound, but it wasn't needed. The video clearly showed Elsa approaching the counter, Peter dismissing her, the dropped items, the growing distress, and finally, Keanu Reeves stepping in. What the viral phone videos hadn't captured, but the security cameras had, was the remarkable transformation that had occurred throughout the store afterward. The ripple effect of kindness spreading from one section to another. What Mr. Reeves did was exceptional, Patricia said. But it shouldn't be. Basic human decency shouldn't require a celebrity to remind us of its importance. She clicked through several slides showing customer service statistics. Our satisfaction ratings have been declining for months. We've been losing regular customers. And I believe it's because we've forgotten the most fundamental part of our job, seeing the human beings in front of us. Tom from the stockroom raised his hand. But we're always understaffed. Corporate keeps cutting hours while expecting more productivity. It's hard to provide great service when you're doing the job of 3 people. Patricia nodded. You're absolutely right, Tom. And that's part of why I called this meeting. Corporate has approved my proposal for a complete restructuring of our training program and staffing model. She smiled slightly. Amazing what a viral video can accomplish in terms of budget approval. The news was met with cautious optimism. Patricia outlined the changes. More hours allocated for floor staff, a buddy system for new employees, a revamped training program focused on empathy and problem-solving rather than just transaction processing. But the most surprising announcement came last. And Peter will be helping me develop these new protocols, she said, causing all heads to turn toward the young man in the corner. Peter looked as shocked as everyone else. Me? He stammered. Yes, you, Patricia confirmed. Sometimes the people who most need to learn a lesson become its best teachers afterward. You've shown remarkable reflection and growth these past few days. I think your perspective will be valuable. The meeting concluded with Patricia distributing new name tags to everyone, similar to the old ones, but with a simple addition at the bottom, "How can I help?" As the staff dispersed to prepare for opening, Peter lingered behind. I don't deserve this second chance, he said quietly to Patricia. Maybe not, she agreed. But you're getting it anyway. Sometimes that's how growth happens. Not because we deserve the opportunity, but because someone believes we can do better with it. 6 weeks later, Elsa Matthews pushed a stroller through the automatic doors of SuperSave. Little James, just 3 weeks old and bundled in a blue blanket, slept peacefully despite the whoosh of the doors and the bright store lights. Elsa had debated coming back. The store held mixed memories, the humiliation of that day, but also the unexpected kindness that had followed. In the end, practicality won out. SuperSave had the best prices on diapers, and on a hospital cafeteria worker's salary, every dollar mattered. She navigated carefully to the baby section, list in hand, expecting to quickly grab what she needed and leave. She didn't notice the young man approaching until he spoke. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I help you find anything today?" Elsa looked up, recognition dawning as she met Peter's eyes. He looked different somehow, the gelled hair replaced with a simpler style, the perpetual sneer transformed into a tentative smile. For a moment, neither spoke, the memory of their last encounter hanging between them. Peter began, then stopped, collecting himself. "I've been hoping you might come back. I wanted to thank you." Elsa raised an eyebrow, genuinely puzzled. "Thank me? For what?" "For accepting my apology that day." "You didn't have to." He glanced down at the sleeping baby. "Is this James?" Elsa nodded, a small smile softening her features. "Yes. Born 3 weeks ago." "He's beautiful," Peter said sincerely. "Congratulations." He hesitated, then continued. "After what happened, I almost quit. I was so embarrassed. But Miss Patricia, my manager, She helped me see it differently. That day changed everything for me. How I think about this job, how I treat people. Elsa studied him for a moment. I'm glad something good came out of it. More than you know, Peter replied. We've completely changed how we operate here. And personally, well, I'm enrolled in night classes now. Social work. Really? Elsa couldn't hide her surprise. Peter nodded. I realized I want to actually help people. Make a difference. He smiled sheepishly. It sounds cheesy, I know. Not cheesy, Elsa corrected gently. Meaningful. A comfortable silence fell between them, the past acknowledged but not dwelled upon. Finally, Peter gestured to her shopping list. Now, can I help you find what you need today? The diaper sale is actually in aisle 7 this week, not 8 like usual. As Peter guided Elsa through the store, attentively listening to her questions about baby products and offering genuinely helpful suggestions, neither of them noticed Patricia watching from near the customer service desk, a satisfied smile on her face. The story of Keanu Reeves' intervention had indeed gone viral, circulating far beyond their small community. News outlets had picked it up, social media had amplified it, celebrities had commented on it. For a brief moment, the simple act of kindness had captured public attention. But the true legacy of that day wasn't measured in views or shares or likes. It was in the subtle shift that had occurred within the store itself. In Peter's transformed perspective, in Patricia's renewed commitment to her team, in the employees who now made eye contact with customers and asked, "How can I help?" Like they actually meant it. 3 months after Keanu Reeves stepped into Super Save department store, life had largely returned to normal. The viral moment had faded from public consciousness, replaced by newer sensations and stories. Occasionally a customer would come in specifically because they'd seen the video, hoping perhaps to absorb some residual celebrity magic, but those visits grew increasingly rare. What remained, however, were the changes sparked by that afternoon. Patricia's revamped training program had been so successful that corporate had implemented it in stores nationwide. Peter continued his social work studies, applying his new perspective both in class and on the sales floor. And Elsa, adjusting to life as a new mother, found an unexpected support system in the store employees who always made a special effort when she came in with little James. Keanu Reeves himself had never returned to the store. He had moved on to his next film, his next city, his next quiet act of kindness that may or may not be captured on camera. Those who had been present that day occasionally checked celebrity news sites, feeling a strange personal connection whenever his name appeared in headlines. On a quiet Tuesday evening, as Peter helped an elderly man load cat food into his car, the customer remarked, "You know, you remind me of that video. The one with the actor and the pregnant lady." Peter smiled. "I was there, actually. I was the one who wouldn't help her." The old man looked surprised. "Really? You?" "I'm not proud of it," Peter admitted. "But it taught me something important. Sometimes the people who seem like they don't deserve your help are the ones who need it most. And sometimes the help you give changes more than just that moment. It changes everything that comes after." As he watched the old man drive away, Peter reflected on how true that had proven to be. One moment of cruelty, one moment of kindness, had altered the trajectory of his life in ways he never could have imagined. He often wondered if Keanu Reeves knew the impact of his actions that day. How a simple choice to help a stranger had created ripples that continued to spread outward, touching life after life. Perhaps that was the real power of kindness. Not that it made for viral videos or heartwarming stories, but that it revealed possibilities previously invisible. In helping the pregnant woman no one else would help, Keanu Reeves hadn't just solved an immediate problem. He had shown everyone watching that another way of being was possible. That small acts of humanity could transform not just a moment, but a person, a place, a community. And in a world that often seemed designed to separate people, to reinforce the boundaries between celebrity and ordinary person, between employee and customer, between stranger and stranger, that reminder was perhaps the most extraordinary gift of all. As Peter returned to the store, the "How can I help?" on his name tag was no longer just corporate branding. It had become a personal mission, a daily reminder that the most important role he would ever play wasn't defined by status or salary or success, but by a simple choice, renewed each day, the choice to see the humanity in everyone he met, and to respond with kindness.